Hey, look out. It's Faith Talk Live. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
What a pleasure to talk to pastor, speaker, author Jimmy Rollins. He's got a new book out, Love Outside the Lines, Beyond the Boundaries of Race, Difference, and Preference. Jimmy, how are you?
Hey, what's going on, fellas? It's so good to be a part of the show today. I'm excited to talk about stuff not a lot of people want to talk about. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We're glad you're here with us.
Yeah, and thanks for talking about it because we all need to hear it, and not only hear it, but participate. But first of all, before we get into just the important stuff, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching Facebook Live or YouTube Live, Jimmy is suffering in West Palm Beach, Florida.
Suffering for Jesus in West Palm Beach.
77 degrees.
Somebody's got to do it. These people need to be reached here too. You know?
Yeah. Hey, the new book out came out January 3rd. Let's talk about the book. Wow, perfect timing, right, for this book. Tell us about the book and why you wrote it and what we need to get out of it.
Absolutely. Well, I am excited because I believe that this book, someone asked me recently, how long did it take to write this book? And I'm 49 years old. And so I just said 49 years. Really, this has been my life message. This has been what was spoken over me by my parents when I was younger, that I would be a bridge builder and bring people together. And not just from a color standpoint or skin color standpoint or ethnic standpoint, but from a social, economic standpoint, from a denomination standpoint, just from a difference standpoint. And so that's why I titled the book, Love Outside the Lines, Beyond the Boundaries of Race, Preference, and Difference, because I think we as the body of Christ have this beautiful opportunity to love better, to love like Jesus loved, to follow in his footsteps. And I believe that God has put these words in my heart that, that the listeners and those who read it would just be opened up to the beauty of God's creation, the beauty of diversity, and how even in our differences, even in our different opinions, even in our different, geographic locations or demographics, how love has this beautiful opportunity to erase lines that separate us and really make a connection that brings us together, even through our differences. And so I think we got a lot of lines. We have a lot of lines in our country. We have a lot of lines in the church. We have a lot of lines, and these lines are boundaries that are dividing us, not opportunities that are bringing us together. And I'm really excited to take people on a discipleship journey to teach us how to love like Jesus.
Now, one thing that some people might think would be a great thing is let's just all be colorblind. But that's something you say is, no, let's not be colorblind. Talk about that.
Absolutely. Well, I think we all can identify with, buying a TV in this day and age. Everyone wanted HD when high definition came out. People first started with black and white TV. And then 4K came out, right? And everyone's like, man, I want 4K. Now 8K is even out.
I hope my wife is listening right now because she doesn't think we need an 8K TV, but we do.
Absolutely. But we would never go into a store, a Best Buy, a electronics store, and say, you know what, show me something that doesn't have color. Just, give me black and white. No, we said, give me the most amount of pixels as possible, the most amount of color as possible, because I want to see through the lenses of diversity. And that's what accepting our differences allows us to do. We don't want to see life in black and white. We want to see life in the color and the ethnic and the beauty of God's creation. So I believe that we can't say we're colorblind. No, if we say we're colorblind, then we are not experiencing and we are not embracing what God created and how God created us. And so in this book, I want to lead people on a discipleship journey to allow the beauty of diversity not to hinder the Great Commission, but to really help us fulfill it.
Jimmy Rollins with us, pastor, speaker, and author, Love Outside the Lines, Beyond the Boundaries of Race, Difference, and Preference. Jimmy, I love how you talk about denominational lines, which is very frustrating, right? Jesus prays in the last part of John, which I love, about unity.
Yes.
Are we just not reading that scripture, and are we just reading it and not doing it? And do you think if we could live outside the lines that it would make a better picture, imprint, influence to those outside?
Absolutely. I think the idea, I've heard a lot of pastors say this, the local church is the hope of the world. And I said, yeah, well, I somewhat agree with that if our worlds are bigger than our preferences,
Yeah, that's
if
good.
our worlds are bigger than our opinions. And I think we allow what we, believe and what we, our version. If you think about denomination, if you think about the denominational lines, really it's our version or someone's version or interpretation of what scripture says.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And everyone interprets it a certain way. And then we allow the way that we interpret things to divide us, not to give us bigger perspective.
That's
and
good.
so the word unity, as Jesus talks about, that word embraces diversity. In other words, unity, for it to be defined as a unity, two different things have to come together. Right? It doesn't say in Psalm 133 how good and pleasant it is when brethren dwell together in uniformity. It says how they dwell together in unity.
That's good.
And unity embraces difference, because if it didn't, there would be no need for the word. And so when I think about unity, I think about different things coming together. I want unity in my marriage because my wife is different than me. I want unity with my kids. They're different than me. So what if the goal in the gospel was not to think alike, but to think together? I think that's what Jesus was able to do. He hated sin, but yet he was attracted to it so that a greater purpose could be fulfilled through proximity with people who weren't like him.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
I'm curious about this, Jimmy. You talk about a pivotal day in a class. Was it a history class?
Yes.
Where you kind of recognize the difference between yourself and other students. Talk about that. This is curious to me.
Well, I think it's what I said is like I grew up in a predominantly white, Caucasian white American neighborhood. And, we never talked about race, and we never really, with my friends growing up, we were playing, we were in the woods, we were building go-karts, we were, up to no good together. And when I got to middle school, we were in class, and I had no idea that these kind of things were in our history books. So this is a part of American history where there was a slave in the book, in this history book. He had a noose around his neck. And I remember in that moment, it was like instant lines. Like no one really laughed, but they kind of did. And it was in that moment that I felt lesser than for the first time. It's in that moment where I began to see our differences. And here's the deal, like that's a part of history. And that was in our book. And here's the crazy thing is now when we're talking about history, in the divide that we currently are in society, no one wants to talk about history, but yet history in the book, it literally divided us. But what if we rewrote history? Like, what if we use those moments in history to allow us to establish a new destiny? You see, when we go to the doctor's office, what they do is they ask us our history. What medications are you on? Have you ever had diabetes? Have you ever had cancer? Has this been in your family history? And why they're asking those questions is because they're trying to prescribe something new so that we can deal with what's affecting us right now. And here's the deal. We can't prescribe something new if we don't pinpoint something old. And so in that book, I wish I was equipped at the moment to say, well, let's look at this. Yes, this is a part of our history, but can we now embrace that that we must position ourselves and open up our hearts for a new destiny? So yes, we need to talk about old stuff so that we can have new patterns.
Good stuff.
Jimmy Rollins with us, pastor, speaker, and author. Jimmy, if you would stay with us for another segment, Dan, if we could do that, I would love to keep him on.
Absolutely.
And talk a little bit more about this. Love outside the lines, beyond the boundaries of race, difference, and Preference. The book is out. You can go to IamJimmyRollins.com. Hey, it is Rick and Dan with Faith Talk Live, and we are so pumped about having Jimmy Rollins, pastor, speaker, and author, with us. We've been talking about love outside the lines, beyond the boundaries of race, difference, and preference. And Dan asked Jimmy about a time when Jimmy was in middle school and saw an African American with a noose around his neck in the book, and he had not seen that before. Jimmy, just when you saw that and you went home, what did your mom and dad say?
Well, I tell you, the shame of what I saw and not knowing how to deal with it, we didn't even talk about it.
Mhm.
That's something that I just kept in my heart. And I began to ask questions, and I began to, ask my friends, throughout the years about division and about what their parents are teaching them. Because here's the deal, that was in a history book. But what are our parents teaching us? What are we learning generationally? And I believe this. I believe that no one is born racist. Like, no one's born with hate in their heart, whether it's black or white, right? No one's born with that. It is taught, it is learned.
Yeah.
And in order for us to unlearn something, and in order for us to discover a new reality, we're going to have to accept and embrace where we are currently. And I think a lot of conversations, and why these conversations is hard, is people says, man, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to be labeled. I don't want to be, profiled. I don't want to be, judged. I don't want to even, is that still a thing? Yes, it is still a thing. On this side of eternity, hate is always going to be a thing. And I think a lot of times we like to say, man, I love everybody. No, I am African American. And I have to admit that I have biases. I have to admit that I have preferences. I mean, all of us, if you're married, when your wife asks you, what do you want for dinner? There's a difference in preference that is very different. And we allow what we have been exposed to and what our appetites have been in the past to drive what we want and the outcome of now. And it goes, the same thing with, what we think about people, what we think about police officers, what we think about rioters, what we think about, based off of what news channel we watch. And these things need to be talked about so that we can experience the fullness of God's creation.
Jimmy, one thing I like to ask people, especially authors as they write stuff, as you were writing this book, what did God teach you personally through the whole process?
I think what I discovered when I was writing the book is I was still learning as I was writing. I did not write this book from a place of expertise. I did not write this book from a place of perfection. I allowed God to speak to my heart as I was writing. And that's what I'm really excited about this book. At the end of every chapter is what we call a heart check. And it's just questions that I'm asking our readers to ask themselves. And then at the end of those questions is a prayer. And that prayer came out of prayers that I prayed as I was writing this book. That wasn't my goal to do that. But as I was writing each chapter, the Lord began to speak to my heart. And that's what I'm praying, that our readers would allow that same process to happen within them as they read.
Love outside the lines, beyond the boundaries of race, difference, and preference. We're talking with Pastor Jimmy Rollins. He's a pastor, speaker, and author, life coach as well. You can follow him on Facebook. And I noticed you have a little over 32,000 combined social reach.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Let's talk
so
a little
much.
bit about, I noticed this in the paperwork that I received about the book, 3 benefits of listening to the pain of others. First of all, listening is hard.
It's
period.
really hard.
Especially if you're a man, right?
Listening about pain.
Yeah. But listening about pain is painful.
It is.
Help us. Give us the benefits of listening and how to do it.
Well, I think it's evolved even since I wrote the book. And one of the benefits about listening is experience, right? It allows you to, really get into someone else's world, when we're able to listen, not to respond, but listen to feel, listen to take in, listen to embrace. I like to say it this way. If I had to give a number one, is that we don't have to have shared experience to share empathy. We don't have to have shared experience to share empathy. And so listening allows us to of life. Right? Listening also, it ties me to the person that I'm sitting in front of that says, right now, I don't care what your past experience has been with someone like me, someone who looks like me, someone who votes like me, whatever it is that you're sitting across from, it really begins to heal the heart of someone who's sharing. Because in our differences, when we don't listen, it's easy to now stereotype the kind of person that's in front of us, that all people are like the kind of person that's in front of us. So it gives us bigger perspective, and it really allows compassion to happen. And I think also listening, it allows us to go back and pray. Like it really allows us to have information to later on. And I love this. And this is the question that I've been asking myself, that I'm asking all of our readers to do. God, search my heart. Is there anything in me that God, break my heart for the things that breaks your heart? And it allows me to take an internal investigation of the condition of my heart when we listen.
Love that.
Jimmy, talk about, sorry, Rick. You and your wife, Irene, have a ministry that you've started together. Talk about that, how that came about, and what you guys aim to do with it. Well,
that ministry came out of history, our hard times. Me and my wife have been married. It'll be 24 years in June. Right. And I like to say it this way. It's been about the best 7 years ever. And the reason I say that is because we got into a season in our marriage, even as a pastor, as a leader, where, I wasn't pastoring at home. I was, all about, growing this church, and I wasn't taking care of, my wife and loving her the way that she needed to be loved. And because I was absent, alcohol replaced me. And my wife ended up, in a deep addiction with alcohol. And I thank God that she's now 7 years, 3 months sober. Good. And but while that, our marriage ministry came out of our testimony and out of our brokenness and our healing and the redemption and the resurrection of our marriage. And now we want to give that away. We want to give our story away. And it taught me how to love outside the lines. And so on this side of it, marriage equation 2 = 1, we're now helping pastors and helping leaders and helping people, repair the breach in their marriage. And I absolutely love what we get to do.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thanks for being so candid about that in your ministry and in communication, because that's not an easy one. That's not an easy one to let out,
Yeah, I understand.
Let's fix it at home and we'll just keep it right there.
Yeah.
Right.
But you guys are amazing. Jimmy Rollins and book, check it out. Love Outside the Lines, Beyond the Boundaries of Race, Difference, and Preference. Jimmy, what's next for you? Besides the book, beside the ministry, what else do you have going on?
Well, I'm going to play golf this week. That's what's going to be
good.
And so I play a lot of golf down here in sunny Florida. And then we're just praying right now. We're working on a marriage book. And so my wife and I are writing right now, and our manuscript is due to the publisher soon. So what's next is we're going to put energy, thoughts, prayers, conversations towards this marriage book.
But don't you love how God takes those hard times in your life and is going to use them for his glory and for the good of other marriages?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Good stuff. Hey, we'd love to talk to you again, Jimmy, and we'd love to talk to you and your wife when you get the marriage book out. We're all into that. If you're up for it, we'd love 100%. To do that. Check out this.
We'd be honored.
Awesome.
Check out this book first, Love Outside the Lines, Beyond the Boundaries of Race, Difference, and Preference. IamJimmyRollins.com. That's the perfect place to go. Follow him on your social medias, your Instagram, your Twitter, and your Facebook. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
This is Faith Talk Live.